Question 32 is obviously the first question in this passage, and we know that that means it's typically a question that's about the entire passage, and it's one that we should then save for the end, because if we haven't read the passage, we can't answer it, but even if we have read the passage, we're going to get more information as we do the other questions. So always save these for last, right? These whole passage questions, save them for last. But that's honestly not the main strategy for this question. Because even though it technically is about the entire passage, the question is really forcing us to narrow our focus in a very helpful way. Look at what it says. Over the course of the passage, the main focus, so clearly main idea, shifts from a discussion of an experiment and its results to, right? So it's giving us half of the main idea in the question. So if I do need to go back to the passage to kind of understand and refresh my memory about what I read, we can do that. But I don't need to understand the first half or more of this passage because it's already explained for me in the question, right? So all this stuff here, right? So they talk about the crowds, right? The crowd is wiser than you. What happens? Blah, blah, blah. To test this, right? Hypothesis, we're going to do this. Here's the team doing its experiment. Here's more about the experiment. Here are the results, right? 32, 25, right? Results. Then we kind of get down to here where maybe it starts to talk about the next stage of this paragraph. Our experiment does not reveal the psychology behind people's decisions. Blah, blah, blah. So this is more results. And then we get here. Duncan Watts, a network scientist at Microsoft Research in New York City, agrees with the conclusion, but one question is whether the herding bias is specific to this site, blah, blah, blah. He points out some things. Then he asks some more questions. What explains the difference? Will companies be able to boost their products by manipulating online ratings on a massive scale? Another question. That is easier said than done. If people detect or learn the comments on a website are being manipulated, the herd may spook and leave entirely. So even though this question technically is a whole passage question, it's really focusing us on these end lines. And, this is why it's really important to know as much as you can about the question before you go into the lines, because they give you specific stuff to think about. And we've also actually had a question about these exact lines. Number 36 asked us about this. This is why I like the no reading strategy, is sometimes we get questions that give us information about the main idea, so that when we come back to these whole passage questions at the end, we're actually very well informed about the main ideas because the other questions directed us to the correct lines. So that's what's happening here. We're still going to have to go through these choices, though, and just make sure that we, are summarizing those lines correctly. So it's going from this discussion and results to an explanation of the practical applications of the results. Well, part of that seems pretty true, right? They do kind of seem to talk about the practical applications, what companies might do with this kind of information. So I would leave that choice in. B, a consideration of the questions prompted by the results. So we definitely saw that they were asking questions, like very literally they were asking questions about the results. So again, that seems to match. Choice C, an analysis of the defects undermining the result. Well, this choice is so negative, and I definitely don't think that these are negative lines. Are they positive? No, I don't think so either. I think it's much more neutral, right? It's kind of asking questions, saying some good things, some bad things, but choice C is very, very negative, and we're not getting that vibe from those lines. So it's not talking about the defects of the results, it's just kind of asking questions about the results. D, a conversation with a scientist, so maybe that part's true, who disputes the results. Well, again, this is super negative. Duncan Watts, right, that's his name, Duncan Watts is not disputing the results. He's just asking some questions. That's not as negative as this choice makes it seem. So I think we'd confidently get rid of those two. Then we might have to make this choice between A and B. To me, the answer is obvious. It's going to be B. The problem with A, they do talk a little bit about some practical applications, but it is in the context of questions. So they're kind of wondering what the practical applications will be, maybe speculating a little bit and getting a little bit more specific. But this word, explanation, That's a very strong word, right? To explain something is to go into detail about it. And they're not really doing that here. They're asking questions, maybe there's a hypothesis or two in there, but it's not an explanation of what's going to happen next now that they have those results. It's just a few lines. So that choice is too strong. Whereas in choice B, the word consideration, that's a nice weak word, right? All you have to do is ask one question to technically consider something. And so consider is very weak, very safe. We don't have to do much more than mention something to say that we've considered it. So that word does check off, and that's why B is better. If you just even got it because questions is much more literally like what's happening repeatedly, that's fine too. But I do think that a lot of people get intimidated by these whole passage questions because it just feels like you need to understand a lot. And I would say my main piece of advice with these is a lot of times you don't, because you're not being asked to summarize the passage. Literally in this case, you're not. You're asked to kind of summarize a few lines. But even still, you're not being asked to summarize them. You're being given 4 summaries of the lines or of the passage, and you're being asked to find the summary that's best. So always remember that it's a very much of a work backwards kind of situation with these questions, is you are not responsible for summarizing what you read. You are checking the summaries that they gave you and seeing if they match with what you read. It's different. And thinking about it that way, I think, makes it a lot easier and hopefully means that you won't be as kind of nervous about these questions. They're no harder than the other questions that are about narrow line references. You just got to get over that and look to the answer choices more than the lines. The answer choices are more important.